Madsen Report, the Sunday Roundup, and we're coming to you live. It's May Day from Washington, D.C., and let's go back to the phones. Lynn is calling from Washington State. Lynn, are you with us?
I am. Hi, Wayne. This is in no way to discredit what you're saying, but I'm wondering, have you heard of an author named Don Nikoloff?
I'm not sure I've heard of him. What has he written?
He has written some very extensive genealogy. Oh, he does research into all the different presidents, and he was writing for a now non-existent newspaper called the Idaho Observer.
Okay.
The publisher died a very untimely death. Don Nikoloff has written a series of articles called The Three Stooges Go to Washington. And he has done extensive genealogy research into McCain and Bush and Obama. And I would suggest that you go and look him up and look at what he has done, because it is really, really deep into not only Obama, but his parents and his grandparents.
Oh, okay.
Now, you can find him where I found his stuff was at Don Nikoloff. I'm sorry, that's not correct. DirectLightProductions.com.
Okay.
And he's got several parts that he's written over a long period of time. But what he has done has taken him a great deal of time and effort over many years to go into all the different genealogies of all these different guys.
Okay. Well, we'll certainly check that out. Thanks for the Thanks for the information.
If you're writing that book, then I would suggest that you at least look it up and see what you think.
Okay. Well, that's good information. Don Nikoloff, and it's what's the website again?
It's called DirectLightProductions.com.
DirectLightProductions.com. Okay. Well, I will check that out, and everyone should try to educate themselves as much as they can about the President of the United States.
He also goes into Eisenhower.
Oh.
I mean, he's got a whole bunch of stuff. He's actually written something called Teenage Ninja Mutant Birth Certificates.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, sounds like he has a sense of humor about this anyway, which
he does.
Need to have. But anyway, well, yes.
Very good.
Okay, well, thanks for that information.
Hey, you're welcome, Wayne.
Okay, and let's now go to Jim, who's calling from Kansas. 2 callers from Kansas this evening. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, a year or so ago when I first heard about Frank Marshall Davis, I went to Start page, typed in Frank Marshall Davis, and they show pictures of this Frank Marshall Davis and all kinds of information about him being in Hawaii, and he's Daddy Frank and Obama's books and stuff. And there's just no doubt in my mind but what Frank Marshall Davis is his father. Just
I'll tell you, we probably will never find out who his father is, but I've spoken to people from Uganda and Kenya who are black Africans who have said, look, we're well aware of the tribes over there. We actually, they can tell who's in what tribe just by looking at them. And almost to a person, they're telling me, look, there is no way that Barack Sr., who is a member of the Luo tribe, which is basically a Bantu tribe, as opposed to the other tribes in Kenya, which are, these people are very tall. They're the Maasais, the Kikuyus. That they're saying, look, there's no way that Obama could, a senior could be his father just by, Obama's, his height, his looks. And there's another report that possibly Stanley Armour Dunham, who was his grandfather, took his mother to Cuba in 1960. And there's another report that his father, Obama's father, may have been an Afro-Cuban. And people who are from Miami say, absolutely, he looks very similar to people that we know from Cuba that are, mixed race. So, the jury's out. I think there was a state senator from Hawaii, although we have to say he's a Republican, Sam Sloan, said, look, I know the family. I remember the family. He was born in Honolulu, but he says, I don't think Barack Sr. is his father.
I agree too. But about the Internationale, you think like the labor unions that were motivated or to write stuff like the Internationale were bought and paid for by the bankers that basically pull all the strings nowadays?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I know that back in the 30s and the 20s, you got to look at what those unions were fighting for. They were fighting for, a decent wage, not even a living wage, but and the child labor laws. I mean, we had the child labor used in this country. Now they're trying to roll back those laws. We had situations where people were working long hours in dangerous businesses. Take Chicago, for example. The whole issue of the meat packers. How many people were working long hours who would actually wind up being ground up into the hamburger meat? I mean, this is why the unions originally started. And look, corporations do not like the workers demanding, because you know why? It eats into their profit margin. It eats into the bottom line, and they want to clear everything as profit, and they don't want to put out any money on protection of the workers, paying the workers a decent wage. And I think that's what's being lost. Yes, of course, we know that the union leadership later became pretty fat and pretty comfortable. And I mentioned the case here where the janitors were actually had to go on strike against the AFL-CIO building here in Washington. I mean, that tells you a lot about union leadership. And now the unions have been just totally so. We had the SEIU break away from the AFL-CIO, and the unions are basically emaciated. And the leadership, as we saw with the General Motors union leadership, were more than happy to be co-opted to push things like NAFTA, and that was the beginning of the end. I think in a real sense. When NAFTA was, and these other free trade agreements, and that brings me up to, there's another election. I talked about Canada. There's another election coming up for Peru, president of Peru, Ollanta Humala, who's very much like the presidents of some of the other progressive countries now in Latin America. He is not interested in any free trade agreement with the United States, which will tend to keep jobs in his country. See, that's the thing with free trade. What Brazil has done by not going with this free trade nonsense, Brazil is actually producing in country their own materials. And that you can't have free trade and do that, because Brazil would see its jobs starting to be exported to even poorer countries.
Well, how's that fair for the dollar? Like Panama and Ecuador both use the U.S. dollar. Well, let's just now we all go to electronic money. It'd be that much more convenient if the whole world just used one currency and we all work for pennies on the earth for be slaves and let Rockefeller.
Oh, right, and we know Panama. Probably one of the reasons they use the U.S. dollar is Panama is the biggest transshipment point of cocaine there is. So it's probably always good to keep it in dollars, so they don't have to do the currency conversion when the cocaine reaches the United States.
So, right, there you go. Right.
Yeah, I mean that's what it's all about. Look at the country.
Yeah, I'll let you talk to somebody else. I can listen to you for hours, but I'll get off the line and let you talk to somebody else.
Yeah. I just want to say one thing about free trade. Look at the countries where Obama is trying to push free trade agreements. Panama and Colombia, the two biggest sources of cocaine in the United States. Of course he wants free trade. I mean, the trade not only involves bananas and flowers, it obviously involves cocaine as well. I mean, and we know that Obama has a history in using the white powder himself. So this is only benefiting the narco-terrorist countries of Colombia and Panama, this free trade nonsense. Free trade is just another one of these corporate contrivances that they're trying to sell us, saying, oh, it creates jobs in the United States. It does not. I mean, where do they get that nonsense from? We've seen what it does. Jobs disappear and go to these countries where these people are working in almost slave labor conditions, and they're saying, oh, that's to help the American worker. It creates jobs. Obama got caught in India trying to say, oh, yeah, if we have free trade with India, we'll have more jobs in the United States. Well, ask any computer programmer whose job has been taken over by Indians coming over here on H-1B visas, and ask that person, who's been laid off in the high-tech industry, whether this free trade is working for them, and they just find it's just totally comical. But anyway, thanks for calling from Kansas, Jim, and well, we've covered a lot of ground, and certainly this issue with Obama and his oligarchic ties. They're going to try to now paint Obama as doing so much good for the American people, when in fact, go to your local gas station. Well, if you drive, you have to, of course. But look at the prices. Look how they're shooting up. I've seen gas prices here in Arlington, Virginia, which is right across the Potomac from Washington. They've gone up 2 cents every day in the last 3 days. That's 6 cents they've gone up a gallon, and you can actually almost watch these prices go up. Now, then you go to the store and you see, with the increase in gas prices, transportation costs, the price of food shooting up, and that's everything. That's across the board, from meats to bread to produce. It's just going sky high. But the grocery stores are pretty smart, and what they'll do is they'll take stuff that's not perishable, and they'll run sales. Like you can get 10 cans of tuna fish for $10, $1 a can. That looks pretty good. But then look at the other things. That's all advertised. That's an advertising gimmick to get you into the store for these so-called sales. But I guess we'll be a nation eating radioactive tuna fish from the Pacific soon, because of the Fukushima reactor meltdown. But this is what the corporations, this is what they do. They don't care about your safety. They don't care about your health. These are people who are only interested in making massive amounts of money. And when you talk about, what about the pension funds that own stock in these companies? Well, we know what they've done to the pension funds. The pension funds are going to go broke here soon, because many of these companies have dipped in to their pension funds to provide more money for these corporate executives. And the institutional investors, of course, you've got the same people running that show as you have running Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan Chase and all the rest of these people. Now, it's interesting because, I've been to Wall Street, and I always wondered where the wall is. Shouldn't there be a wall? It's called Wall Street. But there is no wall. But maybe they need to build a big wall on Wall Street and take these people from Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan Chase and put them up against the wall and shoot them. Yes, of course, this is what happens to people who commit these heinous crimes. And people say, well, it's not a capital crime. They didn't commit mass murder. Why should we? Well, yeah. Well, think of the number of people whose families have been destroyed because of the greed of these Wall Street bankers and these Wall Street stockbrokers who don't care one whit about what they do and how it affects people. And yes, that is a capital crime. There have been people who have committed suicide, who have lost their homes. Then you throw on top of that what happened with the Gulf of Mexico and the no response to the Katrina, little if any response to the Katrina disaster. There's 45,000 homes in New Orleans and the New Orleans greater metropolitan area that are still vacant. People are still scattered across the country who are basically they were refugees from that disaster, and that's still with us today. And now we have this terrible tornado situation, and it's going to get worse. We're going to have floods now because of the rain and the Mississippi, and the tributaries of the Mississippi are going to wipe out further towns and cities in the Midwest. We've got this terrible destruction in Alabama and Mississippi, and then we have our dear president yucking it up with these complete vapid individuals at this ridiculous White House Correspondents' Dinner, and he did it last year during the Gulf oil disaster. He obviously thinks it's one big joke. Well, he's one big joke, and he's not a Democrat. He's not a progressive. And there's one thing I can't stand are the people who defend this guy, Obama, who were all out in the street protesting Bush, who was a who was an evil, venal person, and Cheney was, but they say, oh, but Obama, he's so much different. No, he's not different. But we don't see these people turn out in the anti-war demonstrations like they did against Bush. We have to ask for a full accounting from all these individuals, whether they're Republican or Democrat. They're still they're corporatists. And tomorrow, hopefully, Canada may show us the way if they elect as their Prime Minister Jack Layton of the New Democratic Party, an honest to goodness progressive. It seems unfair that we couldn't see people who have affinity with him, like George Galloway in the UK becoming a British Prime Minister. I would also add that we have an election for President of France coming up next year, Dominique de Villepin, who certainly is a conservative, but one that I support because he was against the Iraq War. He's against Sarkozy's war against Libya. I'd like to see France once again having a president who can say no to the United States. That's very healthy. We have to have more leaders who are willing to say no to the United States. Certainly, in the case of Stephen Harper up in Canada, he's just been nothing more than a disgusting poodle for the U.S. I don't know who's worse, Harper or Tony Blair, who was just awful, a war criminal in his own right, who should be standing trial in The Hague for the war crimes that he committed. But we have to start seeing leaders that are willing to stand up and telling this big, brutish, overextended military power called the United States, no, and we're going to do everything in our power to prevent you from extending your influence and your military aggression around the world. We saw it play out yesterday in an attempt to kill Gaddafi. They killed his son and his 3 grandchildren. But just because it's the world leader, that means nothing, because we kill innocent civilians every day with these pilotless drones operated from Las Vegas, Nellis Air Force Base. We're killing innocent civilians every day in Afghanistan and in Iraq and in Pakistan and a host of other places. We'll be right back after this short break.